Great. Let's start today's uh, learning. This is the 28th day. That's so excited. I don't know, do you hear a saying? They say, keep 28 days, you can get a good habit. So the 28 days can help me to uh, get the habit of reading every day? I don't think so. Because I did something uh, like yoga, but I still want to find a way to get back. I think almost 2 months every day. Then I, I, I don't know why I just drop it, but I really need to pick it up. Um, Yoga or Pilates, anything for physical, you know, exercise. I need to do that. I do my brain exercise all the time because I like it. For I I drew picture. You see, I can, but uh, for physical for physical exercise, I really did not that good. Can you see? Yeah, sorry. And this one, I always think it's it's easy for me to do those brain exercise, but physical exercise not that good. But I need um, to pick it up and keep on. For my age, I think I need to keep my health. Um, anyway, this age, this maybe health go up and down, up from up to down, not and down. So this is good for me to pick up physical exercise. How can you do it? Still do stream. I will try it. I will try it. Maybe after after my reading, I do exercise without stream. Yeah. Anyway, I will find a way to pick it up. I have to. Um, okay. Today, let's for today. Then let's read. I need a lot of water because yesterday I I feel just headache, feel really bad headache. Then I went bed very early. Then yes, today I will drink a lot of water to keep my brain work. Nothing else, just headache. Now today is good. I don't feel anything. Just uh, to prevent headache again, so I drink a lot of water. Okay, let's begin. He was dissatisfied with himself and with all his circumstances. He asked himself dully, whether whenever you got your way, you wish afterward that you hadn't. That's He wished now that he had not been foolish. He didn't want to go, but he knew he could never bring himself to go to. No, why not? But he knew he could never bring himself to go to the headmaster and tell him he would stay. That was a humiliation he could never put upon himself. He wondered whether he had done right. That was a humiliation he could never put upon himself. He wondered whether he had done right. He was dissatisfied. He wondered whether he had done right. He was he was dissatisfied with himself and with all his circumstances. He asked himself dumbly whether whenever he, you got your way, you wished afterward that you hadn't. Yes, we did those things all the time. You don't know is it you want or not, but you want this point, but after that you think it's not what you want. Then you get back. You need to get back. Why not? Philip's uncle had an old friend called Miss Miss Wilkinson, who lived in Berlin. She was the daughter of a clergyman, and it was with her father, the rector of a village in Lincoln in Lincolnshire, Lincoln, 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 Lincolnshire, that Mr. Curry had spent his last curacy, uh, last curacy, his last curacy on his death, forced to earn her living. Philip's uncle had an old friend called Miss Wilkinson, who lived in Berlin. She was the daughter of a clergyman, and it was with her father, the rector of a village in the Lincolnshire, that Mr. Curry had spent his last curacy, forced to earn her living. Let's see, curacy, spent his last牧师的职务，curacy curacy on his death to
Curacy.
forced to earn her living. He had taken various situations as a governess in France and Germany. He had kept up a correspondence. He had kept up a correspondence with Mrs. Carey, and 2 or 3 times had spent her holiday at Blackstable Carey Vicarage. Keep kept up a correspondence with Mrs. Curry, and 2 or 3 times had spent her holiday at Blackstable Vicarage, paying as was usual with the Currys' unfrequent guests a small amount for her keep. When it became clear that it was less trouble to yield to Philip's wishes than to resist them, Mrs. Curry wrote to ask for advice. Miss Wilkinson recommended Helburg as an excellent place to learn German in, and the house of philosophy uh, Professor Erling, the Professor Erling as a comfortable home. Philip might live there for 30 marks, a week, and the professor himself, a teacher at the local high school, would instruct him. Philip arrived in Heidelberg one evening in May. His things were put on a barrow. And he followed the porter out of the station. The sky was bright blue, and the trees in the avenue through which they passed were thick, through which they passed were thick with leaves. There was something in the air fresh to Philip, and mingled. There was something in the air fresh to Philip, and mingled with the timidity, timidity, ti- timidity, and mingled with the timidity he felt at entering a new life. Timidity, timidity,
timidity,
timidity, timidity. Timidity, and mingled with the timidity he felt at entering on a new life among strangers was a great exhilaration, and mingled with the timidity, and mingled with the timidity he felt at and mingled with timidity he felt at entering a new life was a great exhilaration. He was a little disconsolate. uh, he was a little disconsolate that no one had come to meet him, and he was a little disconsolate that no one had come to meet him, and felt very shy when the porter left him at the front door of the left left him at the front door of a big white house. An untidy light, an untidy light let him into a drawing room. It was filled with a large suite covered in green velvet, and in the middle was a round table. On this, in water, on this stood a banquet of flowers, tightly packed together in a paper frill, like the bone of a mutton chop, and carefully spaced round it were booked in lesser binding. There was a musty smell. It was filled. A tidy light let him in and took him into a drawing room. It was filled with a large suit covered in great velvet, and in the middle was a round table. On this, in water, stood a banquet of flowers together in a paper frill, like the bone, mutton chop, oh, mutton chop, and carefully spaced round it with books in leather bindings. There was a musty smell. Presently, with an odor, presently with an odor of cooking, the professor came in. Presently, with an odor of cooking, the professor came in, a short, very stout woman with tightly dressed hair and a red face. Presently, with an odor of cooking, presently with an odor, the professor came in, a short, very stout woman, a very a very stout woman with tightly dressed hair and a red face. He had little eyes, sparkling like presently with an odor of cooking. Pres- presently with an odor of cooking. Odor. Presently with an odor of cooking. The professor came in, a short, very stout, oh, a woman, a very stout woman with tightly dressed hair and a red face I thought it was a man. She had little eyes, sparkling like beads, and effusive manner. He took both effusive, effusive manner, 流露感情的 effusive manner. Let's 流露感情的 effusive manner. He took both Philip's hands, yes, and asked him about Miss Wilkinson, who had twice spent a few weeks. She spoke in German and in broken English. Philip could not make her understand that he didn't know Miss Wilkinson. Then her two daughters appeared. They seemed hardly young to Philip, but perhaps they were not more than 25. The elder, Tekla, was as short as her mother, with the same rather shifty air, but with a pretty face and abundant dark hair. Anna, her younger sister, was tall and plain, but since she didn't smell, Philip immediately preferred her. After a few minutes of polite conversation, the pro-professor took Philip to his room and left him. It was in a turret looking over the top of the tree. It was in a turret. 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 院塔、塔楼、角楼、塔楼、
turret, turret,
角楼。I don't know what turret means. Turret, 角楼. We will see. It was in a turret. Looking over the top of the trees in the allegy. Looking over the top of the trees in the allegy. And the bed was in an alcove. So that when you sit at the desk, it had not the look of a bedroom at all. I think alcove. 凹室 I don't know.
alcove,
Alcove.
alcove,
Alcove.
alcove,
Alcove. Okay. Control C. Alcove. So it's 凹室. MMTG. MMTG. Oh no. MMTT. 凹室. Alcove. The bed was in an alcove, so that when you sit at the desk, it had not the look of a bedroom at all. So when you sit at the desk, it had not the look of a bedroom at all. Philip unpacked his things and set out all his books. He was his own master at last. A bell summoned him to dinner at 1 o'clock, and he found the pro-professors assembled in the drawing room. A bell summoned him to dinner at 1 o'clock, and he found the professor assembled in the drawing room. He was her husband, a tall man of middle age with a large fair. A bell summoned him to dinner at 1 o'clock, and he found the professor's guests assembled, and he found the professor's guests assembled, assembled in the drawing room. He was introduced to her husband, a tall man of middle age, with a large fair head, turning the guests assembled, turning now to gray and melt blue eyes. Philip, in correct, rather archaic English, rather archaic, 古老的 archaic English 古老的 rather archaic English, having learned it from a study of English classic. Having learned it from a study of the English classics, not from conversation. It was odd to hear him use words colloquially, which Philip had only met in the plays of Shakespeare. Colloquial.
Colloquial.
口语的 him use words colloquially口语 It was odd to hear him use words colloquially with Philip had only met in the plays of Shakespeare. Professor Erlin called her Professor Erlin called her establishment a family and not a pension. Called her establishment a family and not a pension. Pension 大概就是寄宿的地方，退休金、生活津贴、养老金。Called her establishment a family and not a pension, but it would have required the subtlety of a metaphysics.
Subtlety.
Subtlety 巧妙 But it would have required the subtlety of a metaphysician to find out exactly where the difference lay. Of a metaphysics，形而上学的 metaphysician，
Metaphysician.
metaphysician，
Metaphysician.
metaphysician，
Metaphysician.
metaphysician，
Metaphysician.
metaphysician， 形而上学的。But it would have required the subtlety of a metaphysician to find out exactly where the difference lay. When they sat down to dinner in a long dark apartment that led out the drawing room, Philip, feeling very shy, saw that there were 16 people. The floor, the at one end and carved set and carved 切开开创切片 The service was conducted with a great clattering of plates. The service was conducted with a great clattering of plates, but by the same clumsy lord who had opened the door for him. By the same clumsy lord. 歌词的出笨的年轻人。By the same clumsy was conducted with a great clatter of plain. The service was conducted with a great clattering of plates. By the same clumsy lords. 年轻人。笨拙的。By the same clumsy lord who had opened the door for him, and though he was quick, it happened that the first person to be served had finished before the last had received their appointed portion. And though he was quick, it happened that the first person to be served before the last had received their appointed portion. The pro professor insisted that nothing but German should be spoken, even if his bashfulness had permitted him to be bashful. Even his bashfulness, 羞怯 Even his bashfulness had permitted him. Even if his bashfulness had permitted him to be talkative. Even his bashfulness had permitted him to be talkative. To be talkative was forced to hold his tongue. He looked at the people. He looked at the people among whom he was to live. By the prom professor sat several old ladies, but Philip didn't give them much of his attention. There were two young girls, both, both fair and one of them very pretty, whom Philip heard addressed as Fräulein Havage and Fräulein Cassidy. Fräulein Cassidy had a long pigtail hanging down her back. They sat side by side and chatted to one another with Samantha, with smoother, with smoothed laughter, with smoothed laughter. One and then they glanced at Philip, and one of them said something in an undertone. They both giggled, and Philip blushed equally awkward, awkwardly, feeling that they were making fun of him. Near them sat a Chinaman, yellow face, with a yellow face and an expansive smile, who was studying Western conditions at the university. He spoke so quickly with a queer accent that the girls could not always understand him, and then they burst out laughing. He laughed too, good humored, good humoredly, and his almond eyes almost closed as he did so. There were two or three America, ah, American men in black coat, rather yellow and dry of skin. In black coat, rather yellow and dry skin. They were theological, theological student, theological, theological 神学的，研究神学的。I can't. It's theological. Yes, it's theological.
Theological.
神学的。They were theological students. Philip heard the one
Twang.
twang
Twang.
鼻音一记项twang 鼻音，我觉得口音可能更好。Anyway， 鼻音。Philip heard the twang of their New England accent through their bad German, and he glanced at them with suspicion, for he had been taught to look upon Americans as wild and desperate barbarians, 野蛮人. Afterward, when they had sat for a little, he glanced at them with suspicion. Check suspicion 是怀疑 suspicion. For he had been taught to look upon American, to look up as wild and desperate as wild and desperate barbarians. Afterwards, when they had sat, when they had sat for a little on the stiff green velvet chair of the drawing room, Fraulein Anna asked Philip if he would like to go for a walk with them. Philip accepted the invitation. They were quite a party. There were the two daughters of the floor professor, the two other girls, one of the American students, and Philip. Philip walked beside of Anna and Fraulein Hedwig. I have to check the clapfoot, what clapfoot is. He was a little fluttered. Philip walked by the side of Anna and Fraulein Hedwig. He was a little fluttered. He had never known any girls. At Blackstable there was only the farmer's daughter and the girls of the local tradesman. He knew them by name and by sight, but he was timid, and he thought they laughed at his deformity. He accepted willingly. He accepted willingly the difference which the vicar and Miss Curry put between their own exalted rank, a exalted rank, exalt, mm, yeah, exalted rank. Curry, the vicar and Mrs. Curry put between their own exalted rank and that of the farmers. The doctor had two daughters, but they were both much older than Philip and had been married to successive assistants while Philip was still a small boy. Married to successive assistants while Philip was still a small boy. At school there had between 2 or 3 boldness, then modesty, whom some of the boys knew. At school there had been 2 or 3 girls of more boldness than modesty, whom some of the boys knew, and desperate stories due in all probability to masculine imagination were told of intriguers with them. But Philip had always concealed under a lofty contempt the terror with which they filled him. His imagination he had read had inspired in him a desire for the and he was torn between a morbid self-consciousness and a conviction that he owed it to himself to be gallant. He felt now that he should be bright and amusing, but his brain seemed empty and he could not for the life of him think of anything to say. Fraulein Anna, the flawed professor's daughter, addressed herself to him frequently from a sense of duty, but the other said little. He looked at him now and then with sparkling eyes, and sometimes, to his confusion, laughed outright. Philip felt that he thought him perfectly ridiculous, perfectly ridiculous. They walked along the side of a hill among palm trees, and their pleasant odor caused Philip a keen delight. The day was warm and hoodless. At last, they came to an eminence. Eminence. They came to an eminence from which they saw the valley of the rim spread out before them under the sun. It was a vast stretch of country, sparkling with golden light, with cities in the distance, and through it through it mindered the silver ribbon of the river. Wide space are rare in Red space are rare in the corner of Kent which Philip knew. The sea offers the only broad horizon, and the immense distance he saw now gave him a peculiar and indescribable thrill. He felt suddenly elated. He felt suddenly elated, though he didn't know it. It was the first time that he had experienced quite an quite undiluted, quite undiluted with foreign emotion, the sense of beauty. The three of them, for the other had gone on, and while the girls talked in rapid German, Philip, indifferent to proximity, feasted his eyes. Bad job, I'm happy, he sighed to himself unconsciously. I have to read this sentence again. Philip accepted the invitation. They were quite a party. There were the two girls of the professor, the two other girls, one of the American students, and Philip. Philip walked by the side of Anna and Florian Hedwig. He was a little flattered. He had never known any girl. At Blackstable, there were only the farmers' daughters, and at Blackstable, there were only the farmer's daughter and the girls of the local tradesmen, them by name and by sight. But he was timid, and he thought they laughed at his deformity, laughed at his deformity. 这个词啊 deformity. Let's make it sure how to pronounce it. Deformity.
Deformity.
是 motive, what deformity. Laughed at his deformity. He accepted willingly the difference which the vicar and Mrs. Curry put between their own exalted rank and that of the farmer. The doctor had two daughters, but they were both older than Philip, and had been married to successive assistants, while Philip was still a small boy. At school, there had been 2 or 3 girls of more boldness than modesty. Oh, boy nude. At school, there had been 2 or 3 girls of more boldness than modesty, whom some of the boys knew. Yes, that makes sense, because no girl in school at that time. And desperate stories due in all probability, and desperate stories due in all probability to the mass to the masculine imagination, masculine mas mas mas
Masculine.
masculine masculine 男性的 masculine 男子气的阳性的雄性的男性化的阳性的 masculine 雄性的。Due in all probability to the masculine imagination were told of intrigues with them.
Intrigue.
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 Intrigue. Then what's this? 私通奸情密谋。And separate and desperate stories due in all probabilities to the masculine imagination were told of 奸情密谋奸情 were told of intrigue with them, but Philip had always concealed under a lofty contempt. But Philip had always concealed under a lofty contempt. But Philip had always concealed under a lofty contempt the terror with which they filled in. But Philip has always concealed under a lofty contempt. Lofty 高尚的傲慢 lofty 高尚的高尚的傲慢的傲慢要傲慢 no 傲慢 J it's 日啊我也写错了傲慢 WJ 呀no really under a lofty contempt the terror contempt 那不是诱惑轻视 那就是轻蔑的喽。Lofty contempt, because yeah, I can guess it is, but and a lofty contempt, the terror with which they filled him. But Philip had always concealed under a lofty contempt the terror with which they filled him. His imagination and the books he had read had inspired in him a desire for the Byronic attitude. Byronic attitude. Byronic attitude 是什么 ？attitude。Byronic，拜伦风格的、冷笑的、浪漫的。拜伦风的，拜伦风的，拜伦。Byronic attitude, and he was torn between morbid病态的哦，morbid 病态的。Morbid self-consciousness and conviction that he owned it to himself to be gallant, and a conviction. Oh,
conviction,
定罪，信念。
conviction,
定罪，信念 and a conviction that he owned it to himself to be gallant. 献殷勤的，定罪，定罪，或者是确信。So he owned it to himself to be gallant. 像女子献殷勤的。OK， 向女子献殷勤的。Self-consciousness. He was torn between a morbid self-consciousness and a conviction that he would be gallant. He felt now that he should be bright and amusing, but his brain seemed empty, and he could not for the life of himself thinking of anything to say. Fräulein Anna, the floor professor's daughter, addressed herself to him frequently from a sense of duty, but the other said little. She looked at him now and then with sparkling eyes, and sometimes, to his confusion, laughed outright. Philip felt that she thought him perfectly ridiculous. Perfectly. It's the whole thing. Perfectly.
perfectly,
perfectly, perfectly. Yes, perfectly. Okay, perfectly. She thought him perfectly ridiculous. They walked along the side of a hill. They walked along the side of a hill among pine trees, and they although perfectly, although, older,
odor,
older，前面的音还长哦，older。older, and they are pleasant, odor, and they caused Philip a keen delight. The day was warm as at last they came to an eminence, an eminence, an
eminence,
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 eminence.
eminent, eminence,
At last they came to an eminence, 高地。哦，here this is 高地，然后也当显赫讲。They came to an eminence from which they saw the village of the. They saw the village, the no, not village, the valley. They saw the valley of. Let's see. Rain, I think. Rain.
Rhine,
Rhine 莱茵河呀。Rhine. This is Rhine 是莱茵河。莱茵河。From which they saw the valley. From which they saw the valley of the Rhine spread out before them under the sun. Spread out before them under the sun. It was a vast stretch of country. It was a vast stretch of country, sparkling with golden light. It was a vast stretch of country, sparkling with golden light, with cities in the distance, and through it meandered the silver ribbon of the river, with cities in the distance, and through it meandered the silver蜿蜿而流闲逛。哦，great. Meander,
meander,
me,
meander,
meander, meander, me,
meander,
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 meander, meander. This word sounds so beautiful. Meander, meander. 闲逛无目的的漫谈，蜿蜒而流。I think in wind in the willow. Meander. We should read the wind in the willow after this. Meander. Let's see.
meander,
meander 蜿蜒而流。蜿蜒 no 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 蜿蜒。And through it meander the silver ribbon of the river. So beautiful. Okay. At last, they came to an eminence. At last, they came to an eminence from which they saw the valley of the Rhine spread out before them, under the sun. It was a vast stretch of country, sparkling with golden light, with cities in the distance, and through it meandered the silver ribbon of the river. Beautiful, you see. Wide spaces are rare in the corner of Kent, which Philip knew the only broad horizon, and the sea offers the sea, the sea offers the only broad horizon, and the immense distance he saw now gave him a peculiar and indescribable thrill. He felt suddenly, though he didn't know it. It was the first time that he had experienced quite undiluted, quite undiluted, quite undiluted, quite
undiluted,
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 undiluted, undiluted. It was the first time that he had experienced quite undiluted with foreign emotion,
undiluted,
纯粹的 with foreign, quite undiluted with foreign emotions, the sense of beauty. They sat on a bench. They sat on a bench, the three of them, for the other had gone on. And while the girls talked in rapid German, Philip, indifferent to the proximity,
Proximity.
proximity,
Proximity.
proximity,
Proximity. Proximity.
and while the girl talked in rapid German, Philip, indifferent to the proximity, proximity,
Proximity.
proximity, indifferent, 相同的哦，漠不关心的，一般的 indifferent，漠不关心的，一般的，漠不关心的，漠不关心哦 no 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 no，漠不关心的或者是一般的。To the now I can see. They sit on a bench, the three of them, while the other had gone on. And while the girls talked in rapid German, Philip, indifferent to the proximity, feasted his eyes. 盛宴 feasted his eyes. By Jove, I'm happy. He sighed to himself unconsciously. By Jove 是什么意思 ？Really no 解还是有解？啊 ，by Jove 就是啊。
By Jove.
By Jove 就是啊的意思啊。By Jove, I'm happy, he said to himself unconsciously. Philip thought occasionally of the King's School at Tewkesbury, and laughed to himself as he remembered what at some particular moment of the day they were doing. Now and then he dreamed that he was there still, and it gave him an extraordinary satisfaction, on awaking, to realize that he was in his little room in the turret. From his bed he could see the great columns, cumulus, not column, cumulus， 直接就只有那个吗？哦，必须得是加 s 啊。哦。
Cumulus.
Cumulus 积云 From his bed he could see the great cumulus clouds. Cumulus 积云就是，但是他还要说 cumulus cloud. From his bed he could see the great cumulus clouds that hung in the blue sky. He revelled in his freedom. Reveal. Or only reveal. 陶醉，reveal, revel,
Revel. Revel.
reveled.
Revel.
revel 狂欢陶醉，写陶醉吧，陶醉。He reveled in his freedom. I reveled in my studying, in my reading. Yeah, he reveled in his freedom. He could go to bed when he chose, and he could go to bed when she chose, and get up when the fancy took him. There was no one to order him about. It struck him that he need not tell any more lies. It struck him that he need not tell. Oh my God. It had been arranged that Professor Erlin should teach him Latin and German. It had been arranged that Professor Erlin should teach him Latin and German. A Frenchman came every day to give him lessons in French, and the professor had recommended for mathematics an Englishman who was taking a philosophical degree at the university. This was a man named Wharton. Philip went to him every evening. He lived in one room of the top floor of the shabby house. It was dirty and untidy, and it was filled with pungent. Oh my God, I have to do something. Good girl. Quickly, quickly, Mama 有事呢。Good girl. Good girl. Life is getting better and better for Philip and for me too. This was a man called, that's again this. It has been arranged that Professor Erling should teach him Latin and German. A Frenchman came every day to give him lessons in French, and the professor had recommended for mathematics. An Englishman had recommended for mathematics an Englishman who was taking philosophical philo, philological philo, philological 语言学的 philological 语言学的 who was taking a philological degree at the university. This was a man named Wharton. Philip went to him every morning. He had a room on the top floor of a shabby house. It was dirty and untidy, and it was filled with a pungent odor. Pungent, 辛辣的 pungent odor.
Pungent.
Pungent,
Pungent.
辛辣的、苦痛的、辛辣的味道。辛辣的、苦痛的。So that's so interesting. It was filled with a pungent odor, made up of many different stinks. Made up of many different stinks. He was generally in bed when Philip arrived at 10 o'clock. He was generally in bed when Philip arrived at 10 o'clock, and he jumped out, put on a filthy dressing gown, filthy, 破烂的 filthy, 污秽的、肮脏的、肮脏的。filthy, let's see, 肮脏的。肮脏的。And he jumped up, put on filthy dressing gown, and felt slippers. And while he gave instruction, ate his simple breakfast. He was a short man, stunned from excessive beer drinking, with a heavy mustache and unkempt hair. Really?
Unkempt.
Unkempt hair. Unkempt hair. He had been in Germany for 5 years and was become very Teutonic. Teutonic. 日耳曼人。Teutonic.
Teutonic.
Teutonic 日耳曼人 Teutonic 日耳曼 Become very Teutonic 日耳曼人的 He spoke with scorn of Cambridge. He spoke with scorn of Cambridge, where he had taken his degree, and with horror of the life which awaited him when, having taken his doctorate in Heidelberg and doctorate.
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 博士学位 Oh, I didn't say doctor. It's doctorate. 博士 博士 Having taken his doctorate in Heidelberg. Let's see. Heidelberg. Okay.
Heidelberg,
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 Heidelberg, 海德尔堡，海德尔堡，Heidelberg，海德尔，海德尔堡，嗯嗯，海德尔堡，Heidelberg, having taken his, okay, he spoke with scorn. 诅咒 with scorn 蔑视哦，蔑视 scorn 是，真好玩。He spoke with scorn of Cambridge, where he had taken his degree, and with horror of life which awaited him. When having taken his doctorate in Heidelberg, he must return to England and had a pedagogical career. He must return to England and had a pedagogic career. I will have a pedagogic career. I will teach young kids. He adored the life of the German university with its happy freedom. He adored the life of the German university with its happy freedom and its jolly companionship. He was a member of a Burschenschaft and promised to take Philip to Naples. He was a member of Burschenschaft. Burschenschaft. What's this? Really? You can't find it? 公民身份 Burschen. What's Burschen? I don't know. Yes. 男孩 Burschen. No. Burschenschaft. Well, anyway. He was a member of a Burschenschaft and promised to take Philip to a nap. He was very poor and made no secret that the license he was giving Philip meant the difference between meat for his dinner and bread and cheese. Meant the difference between meat for his dinner and bread and cheese. Sometimes after a heavy night, he had such he could not drink his coffee, and he gave his license with heaviness of spirit. Sometimes after a heavy night, he had such a headache that he could not drink his coffee, and he gave his lesson with a heaviness of spirit. For this occasion, he kept a few bottles of beer under the bed, and one of these and a pipe would help him to bear the burden of life. A hair of the dog that bet him. A hair of the dog that bet him, he would say as he poured out the beer carefully so that the foam should not make him wait too long to drink. Then a hair of dog. I don't know what this means. Then he would talk to Philip of the university, the quarrels between rival chops, between rival chops, cop, call，居然是整个的
core,
call
core,
call 一群人 between rival call 竞争的一群人竞争 rival calls the quarrel between rival calls rival 竞争 the quarrels between rival calls the duels决斗
duel,
决斗竞争决斗也是竞争 the duels and the merits and that professor and the merits of this and that professor. Philip learned more of life from him than of the mathematics. Sometimes Wharton would sit back with a laugh and say, sometimes I need something to, my hands too dry. Sometimes Wharton would sit back with laugh and say, look here, we've not done anything. We've done anything today. You needn't pay me for the lesson. Oh, it doesn't matter, said Philip. This was something new and very interesting, and he felt that it was of greater import than this was something new and very interesting, and it was of greater import than this was something new. This was something new and very interesting, and he felt that it was of greater import than this was something new and very he felt that it was greater import or importance greater import than try 三角函数或者三角形 trigonometry 哪里一个 T 三角学 yes trigonometry trigonometry 三角函数之类的东西三角学 trigonometry which he never could understand. It was like a window of life that he had a chance of peeping through, and he looked with widely beating heart. No, you can keep your dirty money, said Wharton. But how about your dinner, said Philip with a smile, for he knew exactly how his master's finance stood. Wharton had even asked him to pay him 2 shillings. Wharton had even asked him to pay him the 2 shillings which the lesson cost once a week rather than once a month, since it made things that complicated. Wharton had even asked him to pay him the 2 shillings which the lessons cost once a week. Once a month, since it made things less complicated. Oh, never mind my dinner. It won't be the first time. I've dined off a bottle of beer, and my mind's never clearer than when he dived under the bed. He dived. He dived under the bed. The sheets were grey with want of washing. The sheets were grey with want of washing, and fished out another bottle. Philip, who was young and didn't know the good thing of life, refused to share it with him, so he drank alone. How long are you going to stay here? Asked Wharton. Both he and Philip had given up with relief the uh, pretense of mathematics. Both he and Philip had given up with the relief the pretense of mathematics. Pretense 假作借口的，假作借口的 pretend 假作假作借口。The pretense of mathematics. Oh, I don't know. I suppose about a year, then my people want me to go to Oxford. Oh, I don't know. I suppose about a year, then my people want me to go to Oxford. Wharton gave a contemptuous shrug. Contemptuous shrug. Contemptuous. Let's see. Contemptuous. Contemptuous. Like, is it like pronunciation? Contemptuous. Contemptuous. Oh, so slow.
Contemptuous.
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 Contemptuous. Contemptuous.
Contemptuous.
Contemptuous. Wharton gave a contemptuous shrug of the shoulders. It was a new experience. Gave a contemptuous shrug of the shoulders. It was a new experience. It was a new experience for Philip to learn that there were persons who did not look upon that seat of learning with awe. What do you want to go there for? You will only be a glorified schoolboy. Why don't you matriculate here? Matriculate here. Why don't you matriculate here?
Matriculate.
Matriculate. Why don't you matriculate here? 上大学。Why don't you matriculate here? A year's no good. Spend 5 years here. You know, there are two good things in life: freedom of thought and freedom of action. In France, you get freedom of what you like and nobody bothers, but you must think like everybody else. In German, you must do what everybody else does, but you may think as you choose. They are both very good things. I personally prefer freedom of thought, but in England, you get nada. You are ground down. You are ground down by convention. You can't think as you like, and you can't act as you like. That's because it's democratic nation. That's because it's a democratic nation. I expect America's worse. That's so funny. You know, there are two good things in life: freedom of thought, action. In France, you get freedom of action. You can do what you like and nobody bothers, but you must think like everybody else. In Germany, you must do what everybody else does, but you may think as you choose. They are both very good things. I personally prefer freedom of thought. But in England, you get nada. You are ground down by convention. You can't act as you like. That's because it's democratic nation, democratic nation, 文明的 no 民主 democratic 民主 democratic 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 nation. I expect America's worse. He leaned back cautiously, for the chair on which he sat had a rickety leg. Rickety. Had a rickety leg.哦，只有一个 t 吗 ？Yes, rickety, rickety leg,
Rickety.
rickety, rickety leg. 猜能猜得到 ，OK? No, now it's good. Rickety leg, which he said had a rickety leg, and it was disconcerting. When a rhetorical flourish by a sudden fall to the floor, and it was disconcerting, and it was disconcerting. And it was disconcerting, 尴尬的 when and it was disconcerting, 尴尬的 when rhetorical
Rhetorical.
We already learned it. Rhetorical flourish.
Rhetorical.
Flourish was interrupted by a sudden fall to the floor. Flourish. 花样手势 flourish 挥舞挥动花样挥舞挥动哦哦 是挥舞，no no 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 no，挥舞，挥动，and it was 尴尬的 disconcerting，尴尬的。And it was disconcerting when a rhetorical flourish was interrupted by a sudden fall to the floor. I ought to go back to England this year, but if I can scrap together enough to keep body and soul on speaking terms, I shall stay another 12 months. But if I can scrap
Scrape.
scrape,
Scrape.
scrape, 挖空，刮擦。If I can scrape together enough, if I can scrape together enough, if I can scrape together enough to keep body and soul on speaking terms, I shall stay another 12 months, but then I shall have to go, and I must leave all this. He waved his arms round the dirty garret within its unnamed bed, with its unmade bed, the clothes lying on the floor, a row of empty beer bottle against the wall, piles of unbounded, ragged book in every corner. For some provincial unit. For some provincial university where I shall try and get a chair of philology, 语言学的 philology. I shall get a chair of philology, and I shall play tennis and go to tea parties. He interrupted himself and gave Philip a very neatly dressed, with a clean collar on and his hair well brushed, a quizzical look, and, my God, I shall have to wash. Philip reddened, feeling his own surpluseness at an intolerable reproach. For of late he had begun to pay some attention to his toilet, and he had come out from England with a pretty selection of ties. Spruceness,
Spruce.
spruce, 衣着整洁的。衣着整洁的。His own spruceness, an intolerable reproach. Philip reddened, feeling his own spruceness an intolerable reproach. For of late he had begun to pay some attention to his toilet, and he had come out from England with a pretty selection of ties. The summer came upon the country like a conqueror. The summer came upon the country. The summer came upon the country like a conqueror. Every day was beautiful. The sky had an arrogant. The sky had an arrogant blue with gilded the nerve like a spur. Arrogant blue with gold, 刺激 which gilded the nerves like a spur. Spur, 马刺，哦，刺激 like a spur. The green of the trees in the village was violent and crude, and the houses, when the sun caught them, had a dazzling white which stimulated till it hurt. Sometimes on his way back from Walton, Philip would sit in the shade on one of the bench in the alley,差不多 alley, in the alley, enjoying the coolness and watching the pattern of light which the sun shining through the leaves made on the ground. His soul danced with delight. His soul danced with delight as gaily as the sunbeams. He reveled in some moment. He reveled. He reveled in some moment. He reveled in those moments of idleness stolen from his work. Revel. 陶醉. He reveled in those moments of idleness. He reveled in those moments of idleness stolen from his work. Sometimes he sauntered through the street. He sauntered through the street of the old town. Sauntered. 闲逛 saunter.
Saunter.
Sometimes he sauntered through the streets of the old town. He looked with awe at the students of the corps, their cheeks gashed and red, who swaggered about in their colored cap. Cheeks gashed. Cheek gashed. Let's see what gashed means. Their cheeks gashed. Their cheek gashed and that's interesting. Their cheek gashed and red. Their cheeks 划破 gash gashes gash 呢 Let's see, it's the 深长的口子裂口 No 裂口 It shouldn't be this meaning. Their cheeks gashed and red, who swag about in their colored gap. Who swag. 昂首阔步 swagger. Let's see. Who swaggered aboard. 昂首阔步 Who swaggered aboard in a colored gap. In the afternoon, he wandered about the hill with the girls from Professor's house, and sometimes they went up the river and had a tea in a leafy beer garden. In the evening, they walked around and round the stage garden, listening to the learned the various learned the various interests. Philip soon learned the various interests of the household. Fraulein Thackel, the professor's elder sister, was engaged to a man in England who had spent 12 months in Hull to learn German, and their marriage was to take place at the end of the year. But the young man wrote that his father, an Indian rubber merchant who lived in Ceylon, did not approve of the union, and Fraulein Thekla was often in tears. Sometimes she and her mother might be seen with stern eyes and determined mouth, looking over the letter of the reluctant lover. Thekla painted in watercolor, and occasionally she and Philip, with another of the girls to keep them companion, would go out and paint little pictures. The pretty Fraulein Hedwig had amorous troubles too. She was the daughter of a merchant. She was the daughter of a merchant in Berlin and a dash Hassa. Yeah. The young Fraulein Thekla, the professor's elder sister. Then the Fraulein tackled other Fraulein Hedwig. The pretty Fraulein Hedwig had enormous troubles too. She was the daughter of a merchant in Berlin. What? Merchant. 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 Merchant.
Merchant.
Merchant. Not merchant. Merchant. She was the daughter of a merchant in Berlin and dashing Hazard. Huzzah.
Huzzah.
Huzzah. Dashing huzzah. Dashing 时髦的 dashing and a dashing huzzah 时髦的第一 A dashing huzzah had fallen in love with her. A one if you please. A one if you please. A one if you please. A one 常加在姓前。A one if you please. 加在姓前面。A one if you please. A one if you please. But his parents opposed a marriage with a person of her condition, and she had been sent to Heidelberg to forget him. And she had been sent to Heidelberg to forget him. She could never do this, and corresponded with him continually, and he was making every effort to induce an exasperating further to change his mind, and he was making every effort to induce an exasperating
Exasperate. Exasperate.
exasperate
Exasperate.
exasperate 使恶化 And he was making every effort to induce an exasperating father to change his mind. Exasperating.
Exasperating.
Exasperating. exasperating father to change his mind. She told all this to Philip Hines, and becoming blushes and showed him the photograph of the gay lieutenant lying
Lieutenant.
left foot
Lieutenant.
lieutenant
Lieutenant. Lieutenant.
Lieutenant.
这还差不多吧 Lieutenant.
Lieutenant.
Yeah, I like this.
Lieutenant. Lieutenant.
Lieutenant. How? Lieutenant. The photograph of the lieutenant, of the gay lieutenant. Philip liked her best of all the girls at the Frome Professors, and on their walks always tried to get by her side. He blushed a great deal when the other chaffed him for his obvious preference. Chaffed him for his obvious preference. He made the first declaration in his life. He made the first declaration in his life to Fraulein Hedwig, but unfortunately it was an accident, and it happened in this manner. In the evening, when they didn't go out, the young woman sang little songs in the green velvet drawing room, while Fraulein Anna, who always made her. Let's see what Fraulein means, not a name. Oh, okay. This is not a name. It's just
Fräulein. Fräulein. Fräulein.
Fräulein means 小姐的意思，怪不得呢。Well, Fräulein Anna, who always made herself useful, industriously accompanied. Fraulein Hedwig's favorite song was called H. Erberditch, I Love You, and one evening after she had sung that, when Philip was standing with her on the balcony looking at the star, it occurred to him to make some remark about it. He began, I love you. His German was halting, and he looked about for the word he wanted. Halt.
halting, halting,
Halting. halting， 蹒跚的、迟疑不决的、halting 执着的，执着 ，no no 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 no， 踌躇的，我看看，踌躇的，踌躇的。His German was halting, and he looked about for the word he wanted. The pause was infinitesimal. But before he could go on, Florentin sighed. "Ah, you mustn't talk to me in the second person singular." Pause was the pause was
Infinitesimal.
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 Infinitesimal. 极小的。The pause was infinitesimal, but before he could go on, oh, that's. But before he could go on, Fraulein Hedwig said, "You mustn't talk to me in the second person singular." You mustn't talk to me. You mustn't talk to me in the second person singular. I don't know. Philip felt himself grow hot all over, for he could never have dared to do anything so similar, and he could think of nothing on earth to say. It would be ungallant to explain. It would be ungallant to explain that he was not making an observation, but merely mentioned the title of a song. "I beg your pardon," he sighed. "It doesn't matter," she whispered. She smiled pleasantly, quite took his hand and pressed it, then turned back into the drawing room. Oh. Next day, he was so embarrassed that he could not speak to her, and in his shyness, did all that was possible to avoid her. Next day, he was so embarrassed. Next day, he was so embarrassed that he could not speak to her, and in his shyness did all that was possible to avoid her. When he was asked to go for the Euro walk, he refused because he said he had work to do. But Fraulein Hedwig seized an opportunity to speak to him alone. Why are you behaving in this way?" he said kindly. "You know I'm not angry with you for what you said last night. You can't help it if you love me. I'm flattered, but although I'm not exactly engaged to Herman, to I'm not but although I'm not exactly engaged to Herman, I can never love anyone else, and I look upon myself as his bride." Philip blushed again, but he put on quite the expression of a rejected lover. I hope you will be very happy," he sighed. Professor Erling gave Philip a lesson every day. He made out a list of books which Philip was to read till he was ready for the final achievement of Faust, and meanwhile, ingenuously enough, started him on a German translation of one of the plays of Shakespeare. which Philip had studied at school. Sorry. 你是不是偷掉几个图出去了？Ah, a little bit cold today. I think it's enough for today. Maybe a little bit more. I think we can read. Yes. Let's go. Professor Erling gave Philip a lesson every day. He made out a list of books which Philip was to read till he was ready for the final achievement of Faust. And meanwhile, ingenuously enough, started him on a German translation of one of the plays by Shakespeare, which Philip had studied at school. It was the period in German of Goethe's of Hest fame, notwithstanding his rather condescending attitude towards patriotism, he had been adopted as the nation poet, and seemed since the War of the 70s to be one of the most significant glory of national unity. The enthusiastic seemed in the wilderness of the war to hear the rattle of artillery at what? But one mark of the writer's greatness in night, different men can find in him different inspirations, and Professor Erling, who hated the Prussians, gave his enthusiastic admiration to Goethe because his works, Olympians and sided, offered the only refuge for a seaman against the onslaughts of the present generation. There was a dramatist whose name of late had been Marburg, and the writer before one of his plays had been given amid the cheers of the okay, I don't think